something is about to become very real. And when I say real, I mean it in the most literal, most physical, most undeniable sense of that word. Not a message, not a text that arrives in the middle of the night that you read 3 times trying to decode what it actually means. Not an indirect signal sent through someone else, wrapped in just enough ambiguity that you cannot be certain of its meaning. Not a voice note, not a like on a photo, not one of those gestures that communicates something without quite committing to what it communicates. Something that requires presence, something that requires showing up in your actual space, in your actual life, and saying what needs to be said face to face. The kind of thing that cannot be accomplished from a distance because what is trying to be communicated is too significant, too weighty, too real to survive the compression of a screen. Someone is coming to see you, and the reason they are coming is not small. I want to start before we get into the energy of this by taking a moment to acknowledge you, because if you are watching this reading, if something in the title pulled you here, then you are someone who has been in a period of waiting, of uncertainty, of feeling like something important is hovering just outside the space of what has actually been spoken or decided or made real. And that particular experience, the experience of knowing that something significant exists in the unspoken territory between you and another person, without being able to do anything to resolve it on your own, is one of the more quietly exhausting places a human being can inhabit. I want to honor that before we go anywhere else. The waiting has been real. The uncertainty has been real, and you have been navigating both of them with more grace than you have probably given yourself credit for. Now, let me tell you what I feel when I sit with your energy today, because it is different from what I have been feeling in previous readings. There is a movement happening, a real directional, deliberate movement, and it is coming toward you. Someone is preparing. And when I say preparing, I mean it in the specific sense of someone who has made a decision, not a casual one, not an impulsive one, but a considered one, turned over many times in private before being settled upon, and is now moving in the direction of that decision. The direction of that decision is you, and the form that movement is taking is the most honest form available to a human being when something truly matters. They are coming in person. Let me tell you what I feel when I sit with their energy, because I think the texture of it matters enormously for how you understand what is approaching. The first thing I sense, and it is strong, strong enough that I want to name it before anything else, is nervousness. Real, physical, sitting in the stomach nervousness. Not the surface level social anxiety of someone uncertain about how they will be received at a party. The specific, concentrated nervousness of someone who is about to say something that matters enormously to them, to someone who matters enormously to them, with no guarantee of how it will be received. The kind of nervousness that lives in your chest and makes you rehearse what you are going to say and then throw out the rehearsal and then rehearse it again. The kind that arrives precisely because something is genuinely at stake. And underneath that nervousness, deeper than it, more fundamental than it, entirely more durable than it, I feel something else, a certainty, a quiet, private, absolute certainty that this needs to happen. That whatever has been left unsaid between you, whatever has been circling in the unspoken territory of this connection without ever quite landing, has reached a point where it can no longer continue to exist there. It has become too present too heavy, too undeniable in its insistence on being addressed. And the only path forward, the only path that feels honest, the only path that this person can look at themselves in the mirror while walking is directly toward you, in person, with the real thing finally said out loud. That combination, the nervousness and the certainty, is the energy of someone doing something that genuinely costs them something. And things that genuinely cost people something are always, always more real than the things that don't. I want to stay here for a moment because I feel there is something in what I just said that deserves more space. Something about what it means to be the person that someone chooses to show up for in this way. Because I think when we know that something significant is coming toward us, our attention goes almost entirely to the content, to what they are going to say, to how we will respond, to what it means for the situation and where it goes from here. And in focusing on all of that, we sometimes move past the significance of the gesture itself, the meaning that lives in the showing up, entirely independent of what is said once they arrive. Someone looked at their fear, and this person has real fear around this. I feel that clearly it is not a small fear. It is the fear of someone who cares about the outcome and decided that coming to you mattered more than avoiding that fear. Someone decided that the risk of being genuinely seen and genuinely responded to in real time was worth more than the safety of distance and managed communication. Someone valued you enough and valued what exists or has existed between you enough to choose the most exposed, most vulnerable, most honest form of communication available before a single word is spoken when they arrive. That decision is already telling you something true about how much you matter to this person. The showing up is itself a statement. And it is one of the most honest statements a person can make. I want to speak now about what I feel is the big reason behind this visit, because I feel it specifically, and I think you deserve to understand the shape of what is approaching before it arrives so that you can meet it from a place of groundedness rather than being caught entirely off guard and responding from a place of pure reaction. What I keep sensing is that there is something between you and this person that has never been fully resolved, something that exists in a state of incompleteness that neither of you has been able to simply leave alone, even when leaving it alone would have been easier. Not because either of you is dramatic or unable to move on from things, but because what exists between you is real enough that it resists the ordinary mechanisms of resolution. It cannot be filed away. It cannot be managed into silence. Every time one of you has tried to simply let it rest, it has surfaced again in a thought, in a feeling, in a moment of unexpected recognition, insisting on its own reality. What I feel most specifically is that this person has arrived at the end of their ability to leave this unresolved. Something shifted internally, not dramatically, not in a single moment of revelation, but through a gradual accumulation of clarity that eventually reached a tipping point. The tipping point where continuing to say nothing became more costly than the risk of saying something, where the weight of the unspoken became heavier than the fear of the spoken. And when a person reaches that tipping point, when the scales tip definitively in the direction of honesty, the movement that follows tends to be decisive, tends to feel from the inside almost like relief, like finally moving in the direction that was always true. That movement is what is coming toward you. and it is coming with intention. Let me speak to something about you specifically because I feel it in your energy and it matters for how this encounter unfolds. There is a steadiness in you right now that I want to acknowledge and that I want you to be aware of as an asset, not a performance of steadiness, not the kind that requires suppression or distraction or keeping yourself too occupied to feel what is actually happening. A genuine, earned, internally grounded steadiness that has been built through exactly the kind of uncertain waiting that has preceded this moment. You have been doing something in this period that is easy to underestimate because it is invisible from the outside. You have been clarifying yourself, getting quieter and more certain simultaneously, learning more precisely what you need and what you will not accept, arriving through the difficulty of the uncertainty at a cleaner, clearer, more honest understanding of yourself. That self knowledge is what you bring into this face to face encounter. And it is not a small thing to bring. It is, in fact, the most important thing you could bring. More important than any prepared response. More important than any strategy for how to handle what comes. Because when you are genuinely grounded in who you are and what you do not need a strategy. You simply respond from truth. And responding from truth in real time, in the actual moment, without the buffer of distance, is one of the most powerful things a human being can do in a high stakes encounter. You are capable of that, more than capable. I feel it clearly. I want to pause here and speak to something that I think is important to name honestly. Because this reading is about something significant approaching, and I want to make sure I am being genuinely useful to you rather than simply telling you what it might feel good to hear. The face to face that is coming is going to give you real information, specific, clarifying, substantial information about this person and about what is actually possible between you. And that information will be valuable. I believe that completely. But I also want to say clearly a conversation, however honest, however courageous, however necessary, a conversation is a beginning as often as it is an ending. It opens things as often as it closes them. It introduces new complexity as often as it resolves old complexity. What I am sensing for you is not that this face to face resolves everything cleanly and hands you a neat conclusion. What I am sensing is that it gives you something far more valuable than a neat conclusion. It gives you something real to work with. It gives you actual information spoken by an actual person who has chosen to be present rather than hidden about what is true for them. And whatever that information is, even if it is complicated, even if it comes with conditions or questions or things that will require further thought, it is infinitely more workable than the uncertainty that has been filling the space in its absence. Truth, even when it is layered and imperfect, is always more workable than silence. I want to speak to how you hold yourself in the time between now and when this happens. Because I think the quality of your internal state in the lead up to this matters for how you show up when it actually arrives. And I know that the anticipation of something significant, particularly something as significant as this, can produce a kind of mental noise, the replaying of past conversations, the rehearsal of possible future ones, the imagining of scenarios and outcomes and responses. All of that is natural. All of that is the mind doing what minds do when something important is on the horizon. But I want to offer you an invitation to do something alongside all of that mental activity, something quieter, something more like listening than planning. In the moments of stillness that exist between now and then, in the mornings, in the quiet, at the end of the day, in whatever space you have that belongs entirely to you, I want to ask you to listen to yourself, to what you actually feel underneath the anticipation and the analysis, to what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what would be most convenient, not what would make the most sense given the circumstances, what you actually genuinely, honestly want from this situation. Because that knowing your own true wanting is what needs to be in the room with you when this person arrives. Not the analysis, not the rehearsed response, not the protective mechanisms that exist to keep you from being hurt. Your actual wanting, your honest truth about what this person and this connection means to you and what you need from it in order for it to be good for you. That is what makes a real conversation real, both people bringing their actual truth into the room and letting it speak. I want to speak about what I feel in the energy of the days that follow this encounter, because I think it is relevant to how you hold this moment in your anticipation of it. The conversation that is coming is not going to leave things exactly as they were. Something will shift. Something in the landscape of this situation will look different on the other side of this than it did before. Not necessarily resolved, not necessarily simple, but different, more clear, more honest, more grounded in actual reality rather than in the stories both of you have been constructing in the absence of direct communication. And that shift, whatever specific form it takes, is going to create something new to work with, a new foundation, something built on what was actually said rather than on what was assumed or feared or hoped. And foundations built on what is actually true have a stability that foundations built on assumption and management simply cannot have, even when the truth is complicated, even when what is built on top of it requires ongoing work and ongoing honesty. The foundation is real, and real foundations hold. I feel something genuinely significant on the other side of this, Virgo. I want to be honest that I cannot tell you exactly what it looks like because that depends on what is said and how both of you respond and what choices are made in the real time of the actual encounter. But the energy around what follows has a quality of movement to it, of things in motion that were previously static, of a story that has been waiting with a kind of patient insistence to move into its next chapter. This conversation is the page turning, and what comes next is written in real time by two real people with the real material of what they actually feel and what they actually need and what they are actually willing to build. You are ready for that page to turn. I feel that with certainty. Not because it will be easy, it may not be easy. Significant things rarely are, but because you have done the preparation. In the uncertain, unglamorous, unwitnessed way that real preparation always happens. In the quiet work of clarifying yourself and knowing yourself and arriving at this moment as someone who stands on solid internal ground, regardless of what any external conversation produces. That groundedness is your greatest asset as this approaches. Carry it with you. Let it be what you stand on when you hear what is coming and feel whatever arises in response. Let it be what allows you to be genuinely open, not defended, not performing, not managing, while simultaneously being genuinely clear about what you need. Because the real conversation that is approaching deserves the real you, not the careful version, not the protected version, the full, honest, grounded, clear eyed, warm hearted, genuinely present you that shows up when you stop worrying about the outcome and simply allow yourself to be there. That version of you is more than enough for whatever comes. It always has been. Go into this knowing that. Go into it standing on the foundation of everything you have come to understand about yourself during this period of waiting. And I want to name that foundation specifically because I think you sometimes move past it too quickly without acknowledging what it actually is. It is not simply patience, it is not simply endurance. It is the specific, active, daily work of continuing to know yourself clearly while the external world offered you very little clarity to work with. That is a skill, a real one. And it is the skill that is going to serve you most in the moment that is approaching. Go into it willing to be moved, willing to feel, willing to be surprised, and also willing to honor your own truth no matter what you hear, because both things are possible simultaneously. You can be open and grounded at once. You can feel everything and still know yourself. You can be genuinely present in the most vulnerable sense of that word and still be absolutely, completely, unshakably yourself. That is the version of you that is walking into this, and that is the version that is more than ready. If this reading landed for you today, if it named something you have been sensing or preparing for or carrying in the quiet of your own interior, please leave a comment below. Tell me where you are with this. Tell me what you are feeling going into what is coming. Tell me what you need to hear right now. I read every single word, and I am genuinely here for whatever you are navigating. Share this with someone who is waiting for a conversation that matters. A like helps this reach the people it is meant for. And if you are not yet subscribed, I would love to have you here for every reading that follows. Virgo, someone is on their way to you with something real. Meet them with everything you are. You are absolutely ready for this.